I came across this headline from Wall Street Journal this morning, and I felt to talk to us about it, especially as concerns setting war goals. Let me read it out to you. You will see it on your screen too, so that you can follow me. The Wall Street Journal said the war has brought a new Iranian regime into power, one that's harder, harsher, and more extreme. And the headline says Iran's regime has changed. Dash for the wars. Let me repeat myself. The war has brought a new Iranian regime into power, one that's harder, harsher, and more extreme. And the headline proper said Iran's regime has changed for the worse. You know what this says to me? I want to have your comments. I want to know your thoughts, in the comment section after this video. However, what this headline is saying to me is that it is a huge problem when especially powerful countries, the superpowers, the hegemons of this world, when they decide to actually overpromise and unfortunately end up under delivering. I will explain. Again, overpromise and then under deliver. The problem is that in case they end up losing the battle or the war, whichever way it is, they don't just lose the battle and or the war, they also lose face. Now, the problem is that sometimes losing face is worse than actually losing the battle or the war. Let us go back to history. If you ask the Russians, they will tell you that they sacrificed the most and they won the most pivotal battles of World War II. In fact, they will insist that they lost as many as 27 million compatriots in World War II. But when the ostensible victors, the overt victors, that is, the allied countries, the US of A and the other Western countries that are allied with them, when they write the story, they will frame themselves, so to say, as the winners of the war. So you would say that while Russia may have won the battle, the Western allied countries ended up winning the what? Winning the war and won the face. Till today, they are seen as the overt victors of World War II. Especially in a world that is oversaturated by media, where legacy media, oversaturated already, is competing with social media, which is even more saturated with user-generated content. Content creators who can come from nowhere and overturn their hard work and do even better, do even bigger numbers and viewerships than established media like New York Times, like a New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. In an oversaturated media environment, the perception of who has won the war, the perception as to who is winning or losing, may actually be more important than the reality of who has won or lost. Especially under scenarios where we have superpower countries who have clearly enunciated their war goals, before they actually go to war, usually in a lot of tweets and truth social posts. Let me give you evident examples from this war that is currently, on the Iran versus America-Israel war. When the war was going to start, President Trump essentially promised fire and brimstone to Iran. He said he's going to do regime change. It will wipe out the entire regime and replace them with the Iranian equivalent of Rodriguez of Venezuela, the leaders who are essentially jump how high. That was clearly what President Trump promised. He kept repeating it, like Venezuela, like Venezuela, like Venezuela. He said he would take Iran's oil, you remember? In fact, he said he would take the Strait of Hormuz and name it Strait of Trump. He didn't just say that. He said he would seize Iran's enriched uranium. He believed that he had all the people of Iran behind him. He kept repeating, take power from the sitting government. Take your country back and things like that. He promised fire and brimstone. On the side of Prime Minister Netanyahu, he essentially mirrored the same fact. At some point, When things got really hot and hairy, President Trump started saying it would destroy all the power infrastructure of Iran, all the power plants. He said it would destroy all the, desalination plants. He said it would destroy all the oil and gas infrastructure. He promised any and everything he could promise, but at the end of the war, what happened? He achieved nothing. He achieved none of them. His demands now started reducing little by little, one after the other. All the war goals they set started becoming unachievable. At some point, they now dumbed down to the Strait of Hormuz. And when they could not capture the Strait of Hormuz, all they are now dumbed down to, the current war goal, is to actually get the Iranians to return to Pakistan for a second round of almost doomed to fail negotiations again. Imagine where they were coming from. They had overpromised. And clearly, they are now under-delivering. Not only have they lost the battle, not only have they clearly lost the war, they have now lost face. And you see, the whole world is now, in fact, if you go to, social media posts and you look at the comment threads, it is a lot of mockery that happens there against, the prosecutors of this war. It is a huge, huge problem in life. Instead, the best way to have gone about it is to actually under-promise and then over-deliver. Say little, promise little, vow little. It is expectations that actually rout people. When you expect too much, when you demand too much, when you are now given, when you can only eke out, you can only squeeze out very little, you will lose face. You may become a subject of global or international mockery. But when you actually do what? When you under-promise, and if you deliver even a slight bit above that under-promising, at least with respect to global media perception, you will be considered to have won. Guess what Iran did? Iran did not promise anything. Iran didn't under-promise. Iran actually zero promised, if there's anything like that. Because Iran was actually the victim. Iran was the one that was attacked in the midst of negotiations. Twice, not even once. So as of the day the war started, on account of whatever decision President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu made, Iran had nothing on the table. And immediately the war started, Iran just had one war goal, just one, to survive this war. It was just the goal. Evident. It didn't even need to be verbalized. It didn't need to be spoken out. It was clear that, see, whatever attack they bring to us, let us ensure that we keep our leadership, we keep our military, and we keep our, our citizens as intact as possible. Now, guess what? By the end of 40 days, when the ceasefire was to be announced by President Trump, they achieved that, but they did not achieve that only. They snatched the Strait of Hormuz from the ambience of internationalism, internationalism, to the ambience of nationalism. The Strait of Hormuz used to be in no man's land before. It is now clearly an Iranian territory, and America is fighting tooth and nail to price it out of their hands with little to no success. Iran also was able to, to fend off what was supposed to be the start of a massive ground attack. You remember that fighter pilot, issues? And it came in with all sorts of C-130s, came in with all sorts of little bit helicopters, came in with all sorts of F-15s and A-10 warthogs and all. They fended it off in a very spectacular manner. It was a it was a routing of American military, infrastructure. They were able to hold their country together. They fought back, and then they gained by far more than they would have gained if they had not been attacked initially by America. The same thing applied to Southern Lebanon, against the Israeli authorities. So there's a lesson there. Even if it's a personal conflict, interpersonal conflict between people, between families, in the boardroom, at the state level, at the national level, at the global level, always remember to under-promise so that you can end up over-delivering. And don't make the classic Trump mistake of over-promising and ending up under-delivering, in the process, not just losing the war and all the battle, but also losing face, which is unforgivable into this hostile media ecosystem at the global level. I hope you've learned from this. Again, let me have your comments. I would like to see them. Thank you very much. Have a good day.